Welcome. Today's lecture will be about your first major writing assignment, the reflective essay. You might be asking yourself, what is a reflective essay and why would I want to write one? More specifically, you might be asking yourself, what sort of content will I be expected to include in my reflective essay and how should I organize that content? These are all great questions, which show an understanding of what our previous lecture described as the writing situation. As you'll recall from a previous lecture, the writing situation is the setting in which a piece of communication takes place, and it's made of multiple factors which influence the decisions that we make as writers. Two of the most important factors that make up a writing situation are genre and purpose. And when you're asking, what is a reflective essay? What you're really asking is, what is this genre? What are the conventions, what are the expectations of this genre? And when you're asking yourself, what is the purpose? You're really asking yourself, what am I expected to achieve in a reflective essay? And that's what I'm hoping to answer with today's lecture. By the end of today's lecture, you should have a better understanding of what we mean by the term genre, and you should have a better understanding of the reflective essay genre. So we will answer the question, what is the purpose of a reflective essay? You'll have a better understanding of the types of research questions that the reflective essay is expected to address, and you'll have a better understanding of the content, the types of content that goes into a reflective essay. And finally, I'll be explaining how a reflective essay is typically organized. So by the end of this, you'll even have a really nice outline of what a reflective essay looks like. It should be fun. I hope you enjoy. Let's start with the first major point of this lecture, which is, what is genre? According to your textbook, In Conversation, a Writer's Guide, genres are categories of documents. For example, opinion columns, also known as op-ed pieces, which you'll find, for example, in most major newspapers like the New York Times. Scholarly articles, TikTok videos, novels, emails. Each of these are categories or types of writing that have a unique set of conventions and expectations. These conventions and expectations are largely determined by purpose. Your textbook points out genres typically develop to help writers accomplish a general purpose. I think this is important to keep in mind because the conventions and expectations of a genre aren't just arbitrary rules. They exist for a good reason. They exist because these conventions and expectations, through trial and error, people found out they were most effective for getting their point across. They were most effective for achieving the purpose. So now that we understand the concept of genre a little better, let's dive in and look at the specifics of what makes the reflective essay genre unique. First, let's define the purpose that this genre was developed to accomplish. According to your textbook, the purpose of a reflective essay is to share reflections on an individual, event, object, idea, or issue. And if you're thinking, hey, that definition isn't very helpful because you basically just said the purpose of a reflective essay is to reflect, then yeah, you're right. The definition in your textbook is not great. So let's go a step further and define what it means to reflect. Reflection is defined as serious thought or consideration. So the purpose of a reflective essay is to share a deeper understanding about a subject which you've reached through that serious thought or consideration. In Conversation, a Writer's Guide notes that the genre and purpose of a writing project will have a profound impact on the types of research questions it's asking. For example, here are the general research questions that a reflective essay is expected to answer. What are the implications of blank? How can we learn from the examples of an individual or group? And what can we gain from thinking about an idea, work of art, work of literature, performance, or event? For example, let's think about the purpose and the research question posed by the reflective essay that I asked you to read for today's class. The essay was called The Story of a Generation and Seven Scams by Gia Tolentino. This essay is a chapter in her recent book, Trick Mirror. This reflective essay has 8 topics: the Fire Festival, which she describes in the introduction, the 2008 housing crisis, the student debt crisis, the rise of social media, Sophie Amoruso, who founded Nasty Gal, a clothing company, as well as wrote a feminist treatise called #GirlBoss. The company Theranos, founded by Elizabeth Holmes, which fraudulently claimed to be able to provide blood tests with simply the prick of a finger. The rise of Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, and other disruptors. And finally, the 2016 presidential election. Each of these topics are either millennials or millennial-founded companies or events that had a profound impact on the millennial generation. So Jolentino's purpose is to share a deeper understanding of the millennial generation through serious consideration and thought about these topics. Specifically, her article is guided by the following research questions. What are some of the implications for millennials of the 2008 housing crisis, the student debt crisis, and the rise of social media? How can we learn about millennials from the example of Sophia Amoruso or Elizabeth Holmes? What can we gain from thinking about Amazon and other so-called disruptors? What can we gain from thinking about the presidential election? Now, this is extremely important. Gia Tolentino answers these research questions and helps us have a better, deeper understanding of the millennial generation through 2 main writing moves, which we can also call types or categories of content. She provides detailed observations about her topics, often in the form of a story, and she provides analysis, which is why those topics matter. Analysis, simply put, is the point of those detailed observations or stories. Another way of thinking about analysis is these lines of analysis are answers to those research questions we looked at before. So the points of analysis in Gia Tolentino's article are the points which are answering the question, what are the implications of these observations or these stories that I've been telling you? When Tolentino tells you as a reader what you can learn from the example of Elizabeth Holmes, or what we can gain from thinking about Fire Festival, that is analysis. Every sentence in Tolentino's article could be classified as one of these 2 writing moves, either a detailed observation or part of a story, or analysis. And any good reflective essay is going to do the same. It's going to have both kinds of content. I'm going to provide a detailed outline of a reflective essay, but first I do want to go into more detail about each of these writing moves. So what specifically makes up an observation or a story? What kind of moves specifically make up analysis? Okay, first, what would a writer include in their observations or their story? In Conversation, a Writer's Guide states that most reflective writing, at least writing that's interesting, tells a story. Any good story is made up of the following elements: setting, character, plot being the most important, and conflict, climax, resolution, point of view, and dialogue also being extremely important. These are the defining parts, the main elements or ingredients for any subject. And simply put, they can be reduced to the basic questions we've all been taught to ask: who, what, where, when, and why. Who's involved in the subject or story? What did they do? When and where did they do it? And why did they do it? What was their motivation? For an example, let's look at the section titled The Girl Bosses on page 175, because this section is especially fun and a really good example of a reflective essay. Our main character is Sophia Amoruso. She is a millennial, born the same year as Mark Zuckerberg, and she's a former shoplifter. That's just sort of a fun detail, but it's also meaningful in the sense that it does show us something about her character. So we do get the idea that this is not a super ethical or moral person who's, super concerned about other people. This detail tells us that she's primarily looking out for herself and motivated by self-interest as opposed to the collective good or the good of others. And the setting is 2006 in San Francisco. And this is when our story begins. So the plot is that in 2006, she founds Nasty Gal, which was an online retail shop. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it or shopped there, but it was very big when it first launched. It was sort of the first really big, popular online shop. The company becomes super successful. She becomes a millionaire. And then she writes a memoir called #GirlBoss, which claims to be about how women can find success, but really it's what Gia Torrentino calls an example of personal branding. So the book claims to be helping other women find success, but really its main goal is to frame Sophia Amoruso as successful and therefore to increase her influence and ultimately to make her more money. The book is heavily marketed and praised by major outlets like New York Magazine, but around the same time, Nasty Gal, her company, files for bankruptcy, and some of her employees sue her for discrimination and mistreatment, including female employees who claimed that she fired them for becoming pregnant. This is the climax of the story. This is the defining event for Sophia Amoruso. It's the major problem that she now has to solve. And the resolution of this story is that she founds a new company called GirlBoss, which is a company that claims to support female entrepreneurs. According to Tolentino, this company primarily provides conferences for which tickets can cost up to $700. And at these conferences, women, for the most part, listen to speeches from female entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and I guess probably influencers. And they take photographs in front of cool backgrounds for social media. So much like her book, #GirlBoss, Sophia's new company called GirlBoss seems to be a pretty vacuous, shallow product, which claims to be providing advice and support for other women to help them find success, when really it doesn't seem to provide much of substance. And instead, its main purpose seems to be to generate revenue, to generate money and attention and influence for Sophia.